Next, Argiope spins a heavy zigzag down the center. According to one theory, the purpose of the design is to warn away birds which might accidentally fly through her web. It is something to ponder on a dewy morning. In 1969, filmmaker Rich Kern got an unusual letter from his brother about a beautiful piece of land on Fisheating Creek.
I was in Vietnam running a patrol boat for the U.S. Navy when the letter from Jim arrived. Dear Rich, I'm putting together a group of 10 people to buy 400 acres on Fisheating Creek. Our purpose is to preserve the land and the wildlife. We will not cut the trees or develop the land. How would you like to become a part of this experiment? I knew at once that I wanted to do it.
When Rich returned from the service, he spent the next few years recording on film the yearly cycle of events, the drama of life and death that surrounded him at Fisheating Creek. Now, years later, the land remains untouched, just as the owners had intended. Kern's footage tells the story. The Indians called it Clothropopkahatchee, Fish-Eating Creek, an unusual name for an unusual place. During the summer, the rising waters flood the surrounding cypress strand. But now in early spring, the waters are confined to the banks of the creek itself, and everything seems tamer, more under control, and in a sense less wild than what is to come in the buzzing, teeming days of summer. The bald cypress is an unusual tree because, although it is a conifer, it is also deciduous. It sheds all its leaves in late fall and remains barren until spring. And in the spring, as the trees are sucking up water to make leaves and the level of the creek is falling, there's a good chance of spotting a big alligator cruising the surface. It's hard to get a close look at him because the gator sees you coming from a great distance in your canoe. And slowly, like a submarine, slips beneath the surface. And that's the last you see of him. Although the creek is sometimes clear, there are often places where the waterway is completely clogged by a South American nuisance called the water hyacinth. From the air, these rafts are easy to spot. To a band of river otters, the hyacinth raft is more of an opportunity than a problem. Otters don't mind exploring terra infirma if the only hazard is falling through and getting wet. Otters are the most playful members of the mustelid family, which also includes the weasel, the badger, and the skunk. But while the young are playing, as young are bound to do, the mother is curious about a suspicious shape sharing the hyacinth bed. Is that what she thinks it is? Since the otter is by nature very curious, she's bound to take her family closer for a better look. Coincidences do occur. When the alligator just happens to be heading their way, the otters decide not to find out what will happen next. A hole is found, and they bail out like paratroopers through a Bombay door. The otter is made for the water. It has webbed feet and a tail flattened like a rudder for steering. Vultures know that the otter is a fish-catching machine. Snatching a Florida gar is not something the black vulture can do for itself. But because the otter is selective in its choice of cuts, it often leaves the rest of the carcass lying on the bank. This is what the vultures have been waiting for. A mother takes time to feed one of her own chicks, which is now almost as big as she is. A different type of bird fishes for itself while standing on long legs in shallow waters. Herons and other wading birds used to fill the Florida skies as they moved to and from their feeding grounds. Now we must search hard for a big flock with great egrets, snowy egrets, white ibis, and wood storks. One wader that has a lot of personality is the tricolor heron. When the glare on the surface of the water is bright, the heron uses a method called canopy fishing. By making a canopy with its wings, it cuts the glare so it can more easily see the fish under the surface. The snowy egret was almost made extinct when it was fashionable for women to wear their plumes in their hats. And the great blue heron, up to 4 feet tall, so elegant, so stealthy. A predator that figures large in question of which fish survive and which ones don't. Fisheating Creek, with its surrounding cypress swamp, winds its way to the western shore of Lake Okeechobee, Florida's largest freshwater lake. Although the Kissimmee River is larger than Fisheating Creek and provides more water to the lake, much of the Kissimmee has been channelized. Only Fisheating Creek retains its scenic beauty and its natural ability to cleanse the water that follows its meandering course. The runoff that is collected by both rivers comes from vast prairies north of Okeechobee. Today, most of the land is grazed by cattle, but even so, the Florida prairie is a fascinating habitat that is home to some important wildlife species. The crested caracara is one of the rarest birds in Florida. Although it's common from Mexico southward, the only other U.S. location where you're likely to find one is coastal Texas. In Florida, the best place to locate caracaras is near the little community of Palmdale on the prairie bordering Fisheating Creek. Here in the springtime, caracaras build nests in the crowns of 40-foot sable palms. The chick is secure in its swaying nest atop Florida's official state tree. In order to film into the high nest, a tower is built 30 feet from the sable palm. A burrowing owl wonders, what is going on here? On top of the tower, Kern attaches a platform and a blind for concealment. The burrowing owl is raising her chicks in a hole dug by a gopher tortoise, but with her long legs, she often digs her own burrow. She leans forward like a robin as she runs to her mate, who is standing watch. Speaking of gopher tortoises, the caracara has found the remains of one. It is this tendency to eat carrion, as well as its association with black and turkey vultures, that leads people to think that the caracara is a vulture, when actually it is classified more closely with the falcons. The burrowing owl's got to get back to her chicks, so that's the last we'll see of her. Back at the sable palm, some turtle meat has been provided. The caracara feeds her chick with utmost care. She could not know that in the entire state there are probably fewer than 100 caracaras being raised. The importance of her job is beyond measure. These tall and stately birds are the sandhill cranes. Like the caracaras and burrowing owls, they're among the most typical birds of the Florida prairie. Unlike the northern states and Canada, which lose their cranes during the fall migration, Florida has its own year-round population. For 12 months a year, people have a chance of spotting one of the state's most spectacular birds out on the Florida prairie. The broad expanse of central Florida prairie is often broken by pine flatwoods. They are welcome retreats from the open prairies where there is little cover from the unrelenting sun. Flatwoods are maintained by fires which burn out the understory of hardwoods that would, in time, replace the pines. Charcoal between the plates of insulating bark is evidence of past fires. In the pines near Fisheating Creek, the strikingly beautiful red-headed woodpecker is very near the southern limit of its nesting range in the eastern United States. Dead pine trunks make good nesting sites for woodpeckers, but this time they've picked the skeleton of an old live oak. Pine forests attract a variety of woodpeckers. Woodpeckers eat mostly insects, and pine bark is an insect dormitory. Insects, spiders, and scorpions burrow and squirm between the flaky layers, so there's always plenty of food for the chicks. It seems strange that the chicks of the pileated woodpecker get their bright red crowns while they're still in the nest, but redheads have to wait many months to molt their feathers before they can sport their crimson tops. Not far from Fisheating Creek, a red-bellied woodpecker has applied her skills to the remains of a longleaf pine. Inadvertently, her labor produces not one result, but three. She secures a dry spot for her own brood, she hastens the decay of the pine trunk, and she provides a nesting cavity for the eastern bluebird, who cannot possibly chip a nest of its own. One landowner near Fisheating Creek has taken to actually feeding the wildlife. He allows no hunting. Here, where the prairie meets the flatwoods, the deer and turkey have become so accustomed to seeing people that you can get very close without even using a blind. The animals here are not captive. Turkey have made a comeback in Florida, but nowhere are they doing better than in the pine and palmetto flatwoods near Fisheating Creek. A few miles north of the creek, we begin to encounter some ridges of duny sand. The leading edge of this higher terrain was the ancient coastline during the ice ages, when the tip of Florida was covered by the sea. These so-called scrublands are often converted into orange groves, but when left alone, they support a distinctive array of living things. A delicate legume called mimosa sometimes covers the palmettos with its thorny vines, puffy flowers, and compound leaves. Surprisingly enough, the leaves of mimosa fold up when you touch them, and they don't have nerves, and they don't have muscles. Do not search the pine land, the prairie, or the swamp for this bird. He's the Florida scrub jay, and he's found only in central Florida scrubland. As the scrub is being turned into groveland and houses, the scrub jay population is dwindling. Today, the bird is classified as threatened. The jay certainly doesn't act threatened. Even in the wild, it will readily accept bread from a stranger's hand. The scrub jay stuffs bread into the air plants and into the sand. And if you stick your finger up empty-handed, he'll peck you like a pet canary. The six-lined race runner seems to like it here in the scrub. The sand is nice for burrowing in, and nice for wiggling in. And the digger wasp can use the sand for interring young grasshoppers as food for her larvae. Get thee below. We already know of the gopher tortoise's skill in burrowing. Its burrow is sometimes used by the burrowing owl out on the prairie, where the tortoise also lives. The gopher survives the well-drained scrubland by getting water from the vegetation it eats and storing it under its shell. But as the scrub disappears and people continue to catch the tortoises to eat, the noble gopher becomes increasingly rare. Sometime in April or May, the days are transformed from increasingly warm to increasingly humid as well. When this happens, tourists head for the airports driven by the heat. Migratory birds hit the flyways driven by the changing length of day. Everybody knows that something is about to happen. From May till September, the rains fall almost every day. The pattern is usually the same. In mid-afternoon, the clouds build, drop their moisture, and dissipate. The water affects all things. Even a tree frog must remember how to cope with a leaf that is slowly slipping out from under it. The rising waters overflow the creek and invade the cypress strand knee-deep. Animation shows how this happens. The rain that falls always creates a problem for the paper wasps. Their nest becomes soaked with water. Now they must act quickly. Sucking up this water, they take it to the edge of their nest and drop it off. This is important business for the wasps. If they didn't do this, their nest would disintegrate like a soggy newspaper. But the brain of a paper wasp is a tiny thing. Here's one dropping its water right back on the nest again. As night approaches, a mammal called the nine-banded armadillo leaves his burrow to begin foraging for food. He is part of the night shift, the caste of living things that is more active at night than during the day. Night is a time for special events. It can be best explained as an ecological niche in time. The freshwater apple snail is rarely seen out of water, except when caught by a snail kite or a limpkin. Tonight, the apple snail is laying its eggs on a cypress knee, but the action is so slow we can only perceive it in time-lapse. A female green lynx spider has laid her eggs in the secrecy of night, and now she's finishing her egg sac. By working in the dark, she does not draw the attention of birds and other predators. A combination of rain and darkness makes the mushroom sprout. This one took only 4 hours. In 6 hours, the resurrection fern will resurrect, not from the dead, but from a dried state of dormancy that protects it during the winter drought. For support, the fern attaches itself to the bark of trees, and like the Spanish moss, is able to gather its sustenance from the air. Such plants are called epiphytes, and the trees here are littered with them. The butterfly orchid illustrates another secret about air plants. Their roots are photosynthetic, just as leaves normally are. Beyond all this are the spectacular blooms of the air plants that decorate the swamp as no mere mortal ever could. Beauty and the Beast. The cypress swamp is a study in contrasts. Just when tranquility settles in, you put your hand on a scorpion or stumble into a gator's nest. Although it is not likely to discover an unguarded alligator nest in the wild, an unprotected nest has been found at an alligator farm in nearby Palmdale. By midsummer, the eggs are hatching after a 2-month incubation. In order to assist the babies, the top of the mound has been cleared off just as the female alligator would do it after hearing the muffled grunts of her young. Life is a struggle from the beginning. Most baby alligators fall prey to otters, owls, snakes, larger alligators, and other predators. From among the 10 owners of the 400-acre tract, one young family has arrived at the creek for the weekend. They're glad to be out of the city. A day spent at Fisheating Creek is a chance to draw our attention away from ourselves and focus it on a world which is not of our own making. In this simple pursuit, we witness the interaction of an endless variety of living things. Individual life affecting individual life, cycle affecting cycle, seasons, migrations, death and decay, all affected by ever-changing levels of light, temperature, humidity, and other conditions too numerous. No one can claim to understand it well. Nature has the power to enrich lives by posing infinite questions to exploring minds who might be inspired to unlock secrets or even ponder such questions as, how did life on Earth begin? Or, is an insect capable of any degree of reason as we know it? Children are especially good at responding to nature, and it is important to surround them with it often. One question that might be asked of the world is, why does the millipede need so many legs? With 2 pairs of legs for every segment of its body, couldn't it do like the centipede and get by with only one? One way to explore the world at Fisheating Creek is to actually wade in it. Judy and her daughter Laura are brave enough to do this, even though gigantic spiders perch on almost every trunk. Overhead, especially when acorns are in short supply, the gray squirrel rips open the cones of cypress to get the seeds inside. By late summer, Fisheating Creek is a buzzing world that seems to be ruled by insects. Everywhere we look in air, earth, and water, insects are not only thriving, but preparing for the next generation. A mating pair of dragonflies doesn't even bother to uncouple as the female splashes her eggs into the water. In time, each egg hatches into a nymph. The nymph is a ferocious predator. The nymph's incredible weapon is a jointed lower lip called a labium. The labium serves as a clever hand for not only catching fish, but for feeding them into the mouth. It is a quick and savage meal. By a method not fully understood, the nymph, in due time, knows that a gigantic inner metamorphosis has taken place from gill breather to air breather. And not only this, but much more. The emergence of the adult usually happens toward the end of night, just before first light. If the nymphs are cunning, the adults are even more so. They have huge compound eyes for detecting the lateral movement of other flying insects and can maneuver like fighters to grab prey in flight. At Fisheating Creek, small brown dragonflies are caught by larger green ones, and the greens are eaten by other greens even larger. With its many capabilities, it is tempting at this point to regard the dragonfly as something superior in the world of small creatures. But whether the dragonfly can avoid all problems in its constant quest for prey remains to be seen. The dragonfly's shiny wings stick fast to our Argiope's web, and in a flash, the spider puts out a daunting shroud of threads. Completely entangled, the dragonfly cannot use its powerful jaws, nor can it prevent the spider's poisonous bite, which will slowly subdue it. Our Argiope is in total control. A grasshopper taking a carefree leap finds itself in the same predicament. Its powerful legs cannot budge the silken band that binds it round and round. Our Argiope's world is her web. She knows it so well she can repair it and use it all by her unerring sense of touch. The damage to her orb can be fixed in the morning. But for now, she's prepared a very big meal. In this watery field lives the incredible female jumping spider. She looks like a little furry dog. She has 2 big brown eyes and 6 smaller ones. It's the mating season, and here comes a male out of the grass. He's a handsome devil. He spots the female and raises his front legs in the famous mating dance of the jumping spider, attempting to woo her. But what's this? The female's not interested. Where did she go? There she is, above him on the stem. Her only escape is to go down the stem, but that means she's got to get past him. Yep, there she goes. And the male knows he's got to change his approach. He goes to visit another female at her silk retreat. Again he dances. By this he's saying, "I'm a male of your species. May I come in?" She touches him, and that must be a signal because the male is allowed to enter. Amazing as it seems, the jumpers are not mating. By carefully snipping away the silk sheet, we can see that the female is molting, and it appears that the male is actually helping her. Hanging below her is the shed covering of her head. It even has the little eye covers in it. And now she's molting her legs, just like you would slip your hand out of a glove. During her life, the female has shed many times in order to grow, but it is not until her final molt that she is able to reproduce. The same is true of the golden silk spider. Above her hangs her exoskeleton, which she's just molted. But can you see the tiny spider in the center heading to the top? That's a full-grown male, and that's as big as he ever gets. To him, the female is a dangerous giant, so he uses this brief time when her exoskeleton is hardening in order to mate with her. A month has passed since the green lynx spider laid her eggs. Everything seems peaceful, the mother with her dozens of young. But is it? Because the babies are busy devouring each other. The first meal of a spiderling is often one of its own brothers or sisters. If a grasshopper jumps by, it's the job of the mother to chase it away. But now that her young have hatched, her work is almost done. Her life is almost over. With all that is true about spiders, it seems evident that they reign supreme in the world of small creatures. But one day, under a boardwalk, we watch a mud dauber wasp stuff a paralyzed spider into its nest. Only now do we realize that searching for nature's superior little creature is a futile search. Every animal is specialized in some way to make its existence in the world. Everything has its strengths and its weaknesses. One of the mud dauber's strengths is knowing how to pluck a spider out of its web and paralyze it. After filling her chamber with spiders, the mud dauber lays one egg and seals the chamber. The developing grub eats all the paralyzed spiders and eventually changes by metamorphosis into an adult wasp. The mud dauber's other great skill is her craftsmanship in handling mud. Instinctively, she knows how to choose it, gather it into a ball, and shape it into a cylinder typical of her species. She uses her mouth, legs, and antennae as her tools. What the mud dauber cannot do is change her mind about what kind of vessel to build. Each species has its own set design. The potter wasp builds a perfect little bud vase which she fills with paralyzed inchworms, food for her larvae. Late one summer at Fisheating Creek, there was an invasion of inchworms. There were billions of them feeding on the cypress needles all the way to Lake Okeechobee. They were dropping to the ground by the millions. In their efforts to get more food, many crawled up knees thinking they were going up trunks. What a predicament. Their instincts told them to go higher to get food, but there's no way up on a cypress knee. Back and forth, they went spinning silk and crawling on top of each other, hopelessly bound by the power of instinct. Because of all their nibbling, the entire cypress strand turned brown almost overnight, and Fisheating Creek became a very gloomy place. But in another month, this would have happened anyway. For in the fall, the cypress needles always turn brown just before they drop. In March, the swamp is a tender shade of green, and everything seems new. Spring is already here. Now that the cypress strand is dry, it is not difficult tracking down the nest of a red-shouldered hawk. An adult sitting on eggs peers motionless over the top. Nearby, 2 barred owl chicks have already hatched out. In due time, eggshells appear under the hawk nest. 28 days of faithful incubation have paid off in 3 handsome chicks. Although the red-shouldered hawk builds its nest in the secluded swamp, it would rather hunt in the prairie marshes nearby. In these open wetlands, the hawks can easily find the leopard frogs and water snakes they prefer. There's a water snake in the grass, and the hawk has seen it. The hawk has the snake in its talons, and the snake is striking wildly at the leg of the hawk. In nature, struggles are usually brief. The hawk merely snips off the head of the water snake and begins its meal. At Fisheating Creek, the most plentiful food for the red-shouldered hawk is the leopard frog. The other parent has found one. You can see the frog in its talons. It transfers the food to its bill. The frog has been given to one chick, and now it's gulping it down whole. As long as the parent stays at the nest to supervise, each baby hawk gets part of the food. The problem is, however, that the parent often flies in with something, leaves it at the nest, and flies out again, thus leaving the chicks to their own devices. See how one fends off the other with its wing, taking all the food for itself? And so it is true that a weaker one may starve to death in the nest or possibly even get pushed out. It just doesn't pay to take an overly sentimental view of nature. Another season has passed, for beneath the hawk nest, water is already beginning to cover the grassy floor of the cypress strand. It is a symbol of hope that for another generation of hawks, life will be good at a place called Fisheating Creek.